What's up, Moran Park? Hey, I wanted to go over again just some of the things we've been talking about the past number of weeks at Moran about God's heart, God's vision, not just for Moran, but for what He's doing beyond Moran Park as well, and the part that we get to participate in this. And I know some of you don't come on Sundays, you don't come every Sunday. You're meeting in your house churches, or if you're like me, you just need things repeated a few times before it really sticks. And so I just want to remind us of the exciting things I think God's calling us to in this next season. That, the thing I've been amazed about recently is how God has this worldwide vision, right? He wants to see His glory fill the entire earth. But the way He often accomplishes that is He starts really small, and He does it through families. And as that family's faithful and it grows and it multiplies, then His worldwide vision is accomplished. You see this even back with Adam and Eve in the beginning of the garden. He takes the first family and He says, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Take the image of God that I'm instilling in you, reproduce it until it fills the entire earth. Now again, that gets a little sideways pretty quickly, but God doesn't give up on His worldwide vision. You see this with Abraham then, where He calls Abraham. He says, leave your family, leave this place, and takes his wife with him to a place that God was going to tell him later. And then He says this in Genesis chapter 12 about, in you, Abraham, all the families of the earth will be blessed. He said, I'm going to bless you, but in you, all the families of the earth are going to be blessed. He's saying, I'm going to enter a special relationship with you. I want to bless you, but the blessing isn't just for you. The blessing is not to be contained for yourself. The blessing is to be shared and passed on, that all the families of the earth are going to be blessed through you. God's worldwide vision is going to be accomplished through Abraham and his wife Sarah. Now that kind of gets sideways too as well. But God's heart for that doesn't stop. You fast forward to the New Testament, and God is now establishing this spiritual family, not based on physical lineage, but being born again into the family of God. In Ephesians chapter 1, it talks about, in love, God predestined us to be adopted as sons in Jesus Christ. That we are now part of His family. And as part of His family, He wants to bless us. He's pouring all these spiritual blessings upon us. All the inheritance of the Father is poured out upon us. But it's not just for us to receive and hold on to. As it says later in Ephesians chapter 2, that before time, God had these good works set out before us that we should walk in. And that God had us to receive a blessing, but then to go be a blessing. And the reason would be, so as it says in Matthew, that people would see our good works and then they would glorify the Father in heaven. That people would see how we operated as family and the way we were as family, that they would see who our Father is and they would give Him glory and they give Him praise. So that people would then enter and be part of the family, would give Him praise, and the glory of God would then fill the earth. Like that's His heart. He has this worldwide vision to be accomplished, but it happens through family, just being faithful and slowly growing and multiplying. And so I think that's been Moran's heart. Like, I think about this even early in the early days of Moran Park. We sought to be family together, and it felt like family. We'd gather here on Sunday mornings, and it was really small, so everyone kind of knew each other and had a part to play. But it didn't take long until we grew and grew, and then all of a sudden, I realized, wow, there's just not opportunities for most people to use their gifts. Most people can only come and sit and observe when we get together, but all these gifts that they have are not being utilized. And not only that, the people don't know each other, or like not really deeply. Some do, but a lot of us just don't know or are known by other people. And so we realized we have to figure out, how do we help people be family together? And so we started what we called house churches, and trying to teach them what it meant to be family. But except at the beginning, we didn't teach to be family. We taught a format and some principles, and that's where we got it all wrong. And we realized it's not about house church, it's not about the format. There's a lot of different ways you can do it, but the heart is, how do we be the family of God? How does everyone get to be known and know others? How do everyone get to use their gifts? How do needs get to be met? How do we get to spur one another on in the truths and help us grow in maturity and obedience to the word? All those things. And so as we started teaching people the essence of being family, we started seeing greater health, greater maturity, and multiplication. But still, the main focus of what we did was our larger gathering. That got most of the time, the attention, the resources, the focus, and not only just our gathering, but also like the staff, like what the staff is responsible for, and the resources that we went toward those events that they were putting on. The leftovers then went towards these spiritual families, these house churches. And when COVID hit, we realized, wow, this larger gathering cannot be the pinnacle. It cannot be the central thing that the most important thing. It's an important thing, but it can't be the most important thing. It is a part of what it means to be the church, but it's not the part of what the church does. It's like so much of what the church is about and does happens outside of these walls. So much of what the church does and is happens in relationship in more intimate settings. Some of the things that we can do as a church can happen in larger settings, but a lot can't. And so we realize we need to continue to press in and be family together, to be more empowering, where more people get to use their gifts, more people can operate as the family of God without someone telling them what to do, how to do it, or where to do it. And even in a really practical way, we saw a need to shift away from being so staff-centric. And in a practical way, as I've mentioned the past couple weeks, like there's a number of staff here that are transitioning out of their role as paid staff and are simply going to volunteer and use their gifts and talents and time to pour into the family of God, but not as a staff person, just as part of the family. And I think that's going to be an incredible step for us to take together, because it's really going to live into this idea that we want to be family and not rely on professionals. But the cool thing about all this too is, while a lot of this work started at Moran, this idea of being the church and empowering one another to be the church and everyone using their gifts, all this stuff, that started here, but that has exploded way beyond Moran Park. As if you guys have gone forth and as function as family here and family over here and meeting this house over here, meeting this house over here, that you start seeing that begin to multiply to people that are not connected to Moran. So sometimes you'd have this group meeting in a house over here that maybe half the people go to Moran, half don't. That's awesome. You'd have a group over here meeting at home where no one is a part of Moran, and they don't even know what Moran Park is or care. Because I think what's being accomplished is the thing you see in Scripture is you've got these families meeting in houses all over the place, all over the city. But then you have them connected as being part of the church in a particular city. The church in Ephesus, the church in Thyatira, the church in Corinth, right? It's not separate churches. They're part of one family. They're one church. But in practical senses, they're meeting in homes, in smaller little families that are part of one big family. And I think that's what we're beginning to see take place, not just at Moran. What we're beginning to see is that taking place in our city. That people are functioning as a church in homes, but what's being established is the church in Holland. And we started seeing this a number of months ago, where people were functioning as a church, they're growing in maturity, they're doing what the church does, but they're starting to see in the Word, okay, the church has oversight, the church has elders, the church has leadership. We need that. And a lot of these people are not connected to a traditional church, an institutional church. The church in the home is their church. That's their gathering every week. And so a number of months ago, we had some people that are part of these gatherings in homes that are not a part of an institutional traditional church, ask 3 of us to be elders over in the church in the city. And so that's a role I've recently stepped into. It's similar to what I'm doing at Moran, of teaching and encouraging and building up and us to be the church. I'm doing it to those as well that are not connected to Moran Park. And it's been a real gift, because I think so often we're so territorial. It's like, well, they don't go to Moran Park, so I can't help them. Well, if you want to be a part of this, then you got to be a part of Moran Park. You got to be part of our oversight. You got to be part of our gatherings, right? But like, no, if God's heart is for us to be unified as just a city, on a city level, as the church together, it's brought a lot of freedom to simply say, I want to step into helping those that are doing this outside of Moran, as well as pouring into what God's doing here at Moran to help us grow as a family of God. And so there's been this overlap, right? There's been some overlap between the two, some separation, but some overlap. And I think as we continue to grow in this, the Lord's just going to have us continue to learn and see what it means to be joined together as a church in Holland. That as Moran continues to grow and mature, saying, hey, how can we help support what God's doing beyond Moran Park, but also in the city as well? And the cool thing about this is God's not just doing this in Holland. God's doing this way beyond Holland. This is growing to beyond this area. I mean, it makes me think of the church grew. The Church of God grew in the New Testament because missionaries would go forth as representatives to new places and start the work. Or as the church is scattered and people moved away, they would take what they knew with them, what it meant to be family, with them, and then they would go forth and multiply that in other cities. And we're starting to see that. The same work that you're seeing in Holland, of the church in Holland, made up of a network of people meeting in homes as the church in simple ways, that is starting to take place in Grand Rapids. That's starting to take place in Muskegon. That's starting to take place in Lansing and South Haven. And it's not just happening here. It's happening literally around the country, and it's happening around the world. What God's doing here is not unique. We're not special at Moran. God's, I think, just bringing his church back to the simplicity of what it means to love him well, to obey him well, to love each other well, where everyone gets to actually love and press into relationships and use their gifts and to go make disciples. I think that simple thing is not a unique call to Moran Park. It's the call of the family of God. Love God, love others, make disciples. And I think as we've been faithful with these small things, the simple things, you guys have grown in great maturity. You guys have grown and starting to see things multiply. Healthy things grow and healthy things multiply. And we're starting to see that happen more and more. And so I think as God continues to remind us of this worldwide vision that he has, that the glory of the Lord would fill the earth, and that his glory would be made manifest in his church through the good deeds he's called us to as his representatives. That we would start by being faithful with what's right before us and being faithful with the family God's placed around us, these spiritual families, to press in and spur one another on towards greater maturity and multiplication. And I think we're going to see our entire world reached.